Hello madam, my name is Marshall Luis. Today I want to present about the exchange rate system, surveillance and advice. I will start from the introduction. IMF exchange rate advice also presented a critical view of the advice the fund had offered in the period from 1999 until 2005 on exchange rate system, level of the exchange rate and on the mechanics of exchange market and intervention. While the criticism are forceful, they suffer from the lack of professional consensus on what the right advice should be. State some listen and question about exchange rate system and attempt to state what is known and what is not known about them. Provide comment and advice about the problem of the IMF surveillance. For the issue statement of this exchange rate system surveillance and advice, first argue that the developer view is fundamentally correct for emerging market and industrialized countries with open capital. The second one is provide comments about problems on IMF surveillance and also advice. Okay, next I will present about the method that has been using in this exchange rate system, surveillance and advice. They're using a secondary data IMF area ER database that has been using year from 1991, 1999 and 2006. Second, data has been analyzed between developed countries, which is 25 countries has been chosen, and emerging market countries, 39 countries. Third is probit regression, a type of regression where the dependent variable can take only two values. For example, coded 1 if unintermediate regime, 0 otherwise. Okay, that's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Hello, I am ERICK JUMI and I will present the finding parts. Bipolar views is fundamentally correct for emerging markets and industrialized countries with open capital accounts. Bipolar view or two-corner solution is the belief that intermediate regimes between hard perks and free-floating are unsustainable. Fischer in 2004 has stated that for countries open to international capital flows, which is soft exchange rate perks are not sustainable. Second, a wide variety of flexible rate regimes remain possible. And the last is, it is to be expected that policy in most countries will not be indifferent to exchange rate movements. As countries become more advanced and open their capital accounts, they also tend to leave the middle ground of soft perks and move towards either a hard perks or floating, including managed floating regime. Why then the general recommendation to countries to avoid the intermediate regimes if they are open to capital movements? Primarily because such regimes are crisis prone, in part because their policy dynamics are unstable. Rujov in 2003 stated that for advanced countries, free floats register faster growth than the other regimes without incurring higher inflation. So, our comment on IMF surveillance and advice. IMF has adopted a new decision for bilateral surveillance which this article raises question. There has been a great deal of criticism of the fund of failing to ensure the Chinese authorities more seriously over their exchange rate policy and growing current account surplus. So, what should the fund that is newly equipped with the new decision on surveillance should be doing with this? According to Musa, according to Musa 2007, he asserted that the fund's management should have taken an increasingly tough stand, mentioning that the possibility of formal censure of a country's policy by the executive board as a final resort for those rare and highly regrettable cases where all vigorous but less extreme effort of persuasion have failed. Thus, the fund should be working very hard to gain the trust of its members. Should state its view firmly at all times, should press for policy change that it believes are important through ever effective channel, and reserve for very rare occasion a decision to enter conflict with a member. So that's all from me. Let's go to the next presenter. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jonathan. Today I will present about our discussion. The bipolarity for the emerging market and other categories country are significant to capital control. When the exchange rate is not under pressure, the country sees no need to change the regime, and when it is under pressure, the country is reluctant to change the regime because it is unclear by how much it will have to change if it's repeg or where it will go if it allowed to find its own level. As a country develop and open the capital account, they tend to move toward peg while the other will move toward more flexible exchange rate. The exchange rate and fiscal policy can be used by certain central bank to intervene like exchange rate in the exchange market. Change in fiscal policy can be deployed to affect the real exchange rate over the longer period. By flattening fiscal policy and increasing national saving, the government can expect to generate a real depreciation and increase net export. The monetary policy effect on the real exchange rate are likely to be temporary, but may be sufficient duration to have transitional effect on export and import. In the emerging market countries, even the flexible exchange rate, there is intervention to build up the reserve to prevent exchange rate appreciation. In Israel, the central bank does not intervene the foreign exchange market except in extreme circumstances. For those countries other than those defined as developed or emerging market countries, there has a movement from the floating rate to the intermediate regime and vice versa in order to have sustained peg rate. To sustain a peg rate, a country with developing economy that apply the intermediate regime should have the capacity to perform well and flexibly and maintain low inflation. As the country become more developed, they should be moving away from intermediate regime to floating rate that have a greater flexibility of the exchange rate or a hard peg. That's all from me. Thank you.
In conclusion, the government can involve exchange rate in various ways. The extent and nature of government involvement in currency market define alternative system of exchange rate. In one system, exchange rates are set purely by private market forces with no government involvement. In another system, currency values can change, but government participate in currency markets to influence those values. As a country developed and open, their capital accounts, they tend to move forward towards peg while the other will move forward to more flexible exchange rate. The interest rate and fiscal policy can be used by central bank to intervene the exchange rate in the exchange market. Changes in fiscal policy can be developed to affect the real exchange rate over a long period. By tightening fiscal policy and increasing national saving, the government can expect to generate a real depreciation and increase net export. The monetary policy effects on the real exchange rate are likely to be temporary but may be sufficient during to have the transitional effect on export and import. In the emerging market countries, even with flexible exchange rate, there is intervention to build up their reserve to prevent exchange rate appreciation. To sustain a peg rate, a country with developed economy that applied the intermediate regime should have the capacity to perform well and flexibly and maintain a low inflation. As the country become more developed, they should be moving away from intermediate regimes to floating rate that have a greater flexibility of the exchange rate or a hard peg. Thank you.